So I'm really happy today that Dr. Tammy Chang will be joining us. She is an expert in all things relating to adolescence in her, now I have learned her personal, professional, and research life, which is a lot of adolescence to have to handle in a 24-hour day. She is an HSR researcher and a practicing family physician with a passion for adolescent health. And I actually really like how you have this in your bio. So I wanted to say this very specifically. She has a passion for breaking the cycle of poverty and poor health among adolescent mothers and their children. And I really like the wording of breaking the cycle. I think that's an important thing and a nice way to put that. She, has many different aspects of her life, but one is funded NIH research on improving access to reproductive care and healthy pregnancy weight among adolescents. But she's also the founding director of My Voice, which I think will be something that we'll talk about quite a bit. She's also the co-director of the National Clinician Scholars Program, which is how she knows Kara, and does a lot of work with teaching and professionalism with that. And on a personal note, Dr. Chang is very obviously accomplished and well-respected, and she's also one of the most approachable and best teachers that I know. So I'm really thrilled that she will come talk with us. And I know that, conducting research with adolescents is different than conducting research with kids or with adults. Honestly, it's terrifying to me. And so I'm really looking forward to the insight that you have gained over the last few years. So go for it. You're up.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for that awesome introduction. I would say many of the same things about you and many of the people in this meeting. It's a real honor and pleasure to be here. I'm on these meetings all day, and so what I was hoping this would be is really a conversation. I've spoken to the CHEAR group about My Voice before, probably a few years ago when we're a little bit more early on. And I think that the update I would give is that we've just been going gangbusters. There's so many aspects to it, everything from the procedural aspect, the philosophical aspect, the academic aspect, and even the financial aspect of how something like this can continue on for so many years with no grant funding. And so I invite all of you to interrupt me, to ask questions, to think of ways that I might be able to improve or to enhance what you're doing. I mean, that's one of our favorite things, is to be able to help other people do better research focusing on adolescents. I have some slides, mostly just to introduce everyone to My Voice again. There's probably 4 or 5, and I hope that people can interrupt me and just ask questions, and we can have this discussion, because every time I meet with this group, I learn as much from you guys as I think you could ever learn from what I'm about to say. I also want to say I'm representing a really, really huge team that represents people across the campus, but also across the country, lessons that we've learned. And so I'm going to invite you, number one, to, if you want to, especially for people who have already heard this intro part about My Voice, to check out our website, because it has so much information. We work really hard to keep that pretty updated. And so you'll see some of the stuff that we've been doing recently. And then I'm just gonna launch into a little bit of background about My Voice. That way people who haven't heard about it or just want a refresher can hear about it. So here we go, sharing screen. Okay, so My Voice. So My Voice is a national text message poll of youth age 14 to 24. And we send text messages every week, about 3 to 5 questions, and we give them $1 a week to respond. And the reason why we do this is because, for a lot of reasons, but I love to talk about the reason why I personally work with adolescents, because it can be tricky. And a lot of people, I would think that if you were to compare the amount of money invested in adolescents compared to older adults or even little kids, it's way less. But I do it because of what we call the triple benefit, or the triple dividend. When you work with adolescents, this is all preaching to the choir. You can help them now, you help them become healthy adults in the future, and then you help future generations, either their children or other adolescents and adults in the future. And so there's very little in research where you can get so much bang for your buck. And when I don't present slides like this, it's sometimes really hard for people to understand, but why don't you just wait till they're fully developed? Or why don't you work on them, when they're little kids? And you know, the other part of this is this idea that there's really only 2 times in a human's life where they go through enormous neurobiologic development, right? Where you can make up for deficits that they've had in the past. In one, many people know, is the first 1,000 days. That's why there's all this emphasis on, you know, early childhood development and prenatal care and all this stuff early in life. But I think that especially in America, we forget that the other window of opportunity is adolescence. And I argue that in America, we actually don't take advantage of the second and final window of opportunity to improve the health of our population, of our communities, of our families. And you know, the best example is, you know, when you think of teens or you think of adolescents, like, what do you think? Do you think like, oh, there's a window of opportunity? Da, da, da. I mean, some people do. And a lot of times in a larger group, I'll even send out a poll through Zoom and say like, you know, what is the first thing you think of when you think of teens and adolescents? And most of the time, what do I hear? I mean, what do you guys think of?
Trouble.
Trouble. Yep.
Social media.
Yep. Other thoughts?
Transition.
Say that one again.
Transition.
Transition. Yep.
Experimenting.
Experimenting.
Pushing the boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
Identity formation.
Identity formation.
Energy and enthusiasm.
You guys are so great. Are you pediatricians or something? Yes, these are all, and I love the positive spin on this, because a lot of times people will say to me like, get them through it, risk taking, you know, keep them from hurting themselves, things like that, right? Very similar to what you would hear from like toddlers, right? Like make sure they don't do crazy things and, you know, do something that's going to damage their potential, hurt themselves for the rest of their lives, or kill themselves, or get into an accident. I mean, that's a lot of the things that the public thinks about, and even a lot of doctors think about, is like, oh man, we really need to get them through this. It's going to be hard. It's going to be awkward, but we're going to do it. You know, instead of saying like, you know, a lot of things, at least, and other people are saying, this is an exciting time. This is this is a time of great potential and positivity and energy. And that's really what we think the focus should be on. And so how do you do that? How do we do that? Right? Like, how do we get to this place where we feel like we're doing something to make them have the best potential of being their best selves? And part of that is to understand them. I think everybody who does research is like, I want to understand the people that I'm studying. I want to make sure I'm doing the right things, right? Like, how can we know that the policies are right or on track if we don't really understand their lived experience? And so a lot of people will call me, I talk about this all the time, they'll be like, well, Dr. Chang, you know adolescents, like, what do they think about this? Or what do they think about that? You know, tell me, what are the challenges they're going through? And I have to remind them, I just turned 40 this year. I don't know what a teenager is going through. Even as a parent, I can't say, right? Even as a doctor, I can't say, even as a researcher. Why? Because youth have what we could call this invisible identity. I mean, no offense to me in doctors, is this, I don't think that they're telling me everything. You know, even as a parent, I know they're not telling me everything. Part of it is that it's difficult to articulate how you feel. I think it's difficult for adults to articulate how they feel. But it's sometimes difficult and awkward for youth to have to explain to adults what they're going through and what they feel and what's going on and why. And so that's why, you know, what my voice tried to do is to find a way that people that in this age group feel very comfortable expressing their thoughts and opinions. What we're trying to do is get to their invisible identity through a medium that they communicate basically with everyone in their life with, that they feel maybe more comfortable. Part of it might be the confidentiality or the perceived anonymity of this. This might be, you know, comfort and feeling accustomed to communicating through text message. And so that's why we use text messaging. And there's lots of studies that show that adults and youth are more forthright, more honest in survey research when it's not in person, when you don't have to answer to my face, how do you feel about oral sex or whatever. And so we really capitalize on that and leverage it for their comfort, and also for us to be able to get as close as we can to their lived experience and invisible identities. The overall philosophy of My Voice is this: we believe that we need to give the right people the right information at the right time to make decisions about the policies and practices about youth, regarding youth, so that we can improve their health and well-being. It's not enough just to get to the invisible identity, like get this right information. Our team works just as hard at figuring out who needs this information. How do we give it to them? When do we give it to them? And in what format? Do we publish a paper about this? Do we write a brief report? Do we just call them? Do we make an infographic? Do we tweet or use social media? Do we try to inform the lay population about things? And that's as much of our work as it is to think about what we need to get from youth. And our team is full of youth, everybody from high school students, everybody in the age group that we're studying, because that's such a critical part. So our whole process starts with youth. We use text messaging for the reasons we talked about. We're engaging in understanding, finding, developing relationships with these stakeholders. We hope that we're overall influencing the knowledge and insight that everyday people have on youth. We call it transferring it from the conference room table to the kitchen table. And then we're hoping that in the long run, there's policy changes. And sometimes in the short run, there's policy changes.
Tammy?
Yeah.
Could I ask a question?
Yes.
About invisible identities. How does one know anything about, I guess, the authenticity of an identity that one creates through social media? We developmental psychologists underscore the fact that this is a time when youth will try out many skins to figure out who they are, what they want to become. Why would we necessarily think that this is going to be valid over time?
No, I think that's a great question, a great point. I don't think that their social media is likely a good impression of their identity, a good reflection of their true identity. We study social media sometimes. We ask them about their social media, but it's really not my area. I feel like I've done research in social media, but I have the same reservations as you do. The reason why I think My Voice is so powerful is we're asking them their opinions in real time. And we consider our data expired after a few months because of the very reason you're saying, that there's this evolution, this kind of transition of how young people think, feel, and act. And they're practicing developing agency. They're practicing developing communication that they find is effective. And, even now as the co-director of the NCSP, we talk about trying on these different identities, and that's what they're doing. We're just trying to get little snapshots of it through text message.
So
Tammy, go ahead, David. I'm sorry.
No, I was. So we poll lots of constituencies a lot, and we validate against behavior, I guess. Here we're polling about elections, and we know the upsides and downsides, how accurate we are. Has that same kind of research validating occurred when we tap the opinions of adolescents?
This is another really great point. Those types of polls are predicting behavior or asking about what they would do, hypotheticals. We don't really do that as much because it's really difficult for youth to think in the hypotheticals. And it's difficult for all people, and that's why there might be, there's so much bias and just a lot wrapped up into what you think you would do, or what including what you would do in a situation. We ask more about their opinions about things. We ask them more about why they think certain things, their perceptions on things, or their experiences on things. And in those instances, there isn't so much of the same barriers that that you might have when we say like, well, in this election, who would you vote for? And then you're like, crap, if I say this, then they're going to think this about me. If they say this, they're going to think this about me. In the cases that we have, it's like, it doesn't matter what you say. There isn't really, this is not as, I guess this is not like an election where then you can compare to what you actually did. This is more about like, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? Why do you say that? Why do you say this? And, sometimes, I mean, I think the biggest thing about any type of this kind of research is, why would they tell you the truth? Well, in our experience over now almost 5 years, what we found is that they're actually brutally honest in kind of a painful way, that they'll say things and you're just like, wow, okay, we're just gonna go with that. Like they've developed sometimes this little relationship with my voice. We do a lot of engagement where we tell them and show them what we do with their findings, and so we feel really good that their opinions aren't fabricated, but this is a very gray area because they might change their opinion. So I don't think there's really a concrete truth where you have to validate it against an actual behavior here, because how can you validate anybody's feelings or anybody's opinions about a thing?
Tammy, this is kind of reminding me of work on neighborhoods, right? Like, we talk a lot when we do research on neighborhoods, does it matter more what the actual crime rate is in your neighborhood or what you perceive the crime rate to be? And in different situations, one matters over the other. But, to me, it seems like when you're asking adolescents what their opinion is on something, that literally is the gold standard, right? Because it's their opinion, and that's actually what you want. You don't actually, not that you don't care about their behaviors, but you want to know what they think. Is that kind of what the point of my voice is, like at its core, that you just want to know what they think?
It's their reality. Is it my reality? Is it the truth? Maybe not, but it's their reality. That's why we say their lived experience, right? And it's a great example. What you see here is like, even if they live in, this is a very concrete example, even if they live in, for example, a suburban area, but they consider themselves living in a rural area, the research has shown that they behave like people who live in rural areas. So it's very similar to this example that you gave. The other big thing about what we do that's really important, especially to our stakeholders, is that our poll is not a closed-ended poll, it's an open-ended poll. And so we're getting at the why and the how of their behaviors. We're not going to be good at like, how many times have you done this, or have you tried that? Like there's other surveys that do that are nationally representative. What we're better at is the stories, the narratives, right? Like we have over 1,000 youth. We have an over 80% response rate. They're telling us story after story all across the spectrum of, why they think this, or, how does that happen in their lives? And so these stories are what policymakers and people who develop interventions, people doing research, people working in schools, people working with youth, is what they want to know. Like, why is that happening? Why do they think that? What's going on in their minds? And so that's what we're really going for.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to keep going. The other thing that I think really defines what we do here with adolescents is this idea that we don't do research for the sake of research. You don't do science for the sake of science. We're really trying to connect and work very closely with change agents. Sometimes it's a school board. Sometimes that's a policymaker, the national academies, a researcher, a city council person. And then we're trying to develop strategic questions that lead to the scholarship and communications. And each of these 4 boxes actually really explodes out in a lot of different, with a lot of different stakeholders, with a lot of different types of communication, with a lot of different types of scholarship. What we really try to do is make sure that youth are involved in every part of this strategic science, because we think that they're experts. We know that they're experts in their own experience, and we'll talk about that more in a little bit. I also like to just mention really quick, people are like, well, how do people actually work with you? Who are these stakeholders? How does this happen? And one of the easiest examples is to talk about, collaborators. Sometimes they're researchers from U of M, often they're not. They're people from outside of U of M. And what we do is we talk to them and we identify what issue area that they're really interested in. Like, what about youth are you really interested in? We recently talked to people in ISR about youth and media literacy, and there's a question set going on about that. You know, there's physician investigators here interested in youth and how they feel about COVID vaccinations. And so we've kind of like talked about that, concordance between physicians and patients who are young, social concordance and racial concordance, and, you know, how does that make youth feel? What are their preferences? We've asked about that. And so we really try to work with people with expertise and help them get the information that they need. Then we administer these surveys. We administer these text messages. The analysis is in this identification of themes. We use mixed methods and qualitative analysis techniques. And we use a little bit of NLP. That's another area that My Voice does a lot of innovation in. And we write grants on that, not on My Voice, but on that particular technology. And then we share those opinions with the stakeholders. And a lot of times the number one stakeholder is youth. We say, this is what we found out from what we got from what you said. Stakeholders might be teachers, they might be government officials, they might be academicians, and they might be lay people. And we make sure that we have lots of different outputs to make sure that we're sharing what we found with the people that really care. And we do it quickly. I mean, that's one of the biggest things about My Voice, is that things in life don't happen at the pace of academia. One of our biggest challenges very early on was like, how do we match what we do with the pace of what's happening in the world? And because what we do is ask questions on Friday, have the data by next Friday, we give them a week to answer, analyze in sometimes days, if weeks, depending on what needs to be done. And then we're disseminating immediately after that, because otherwise it's like, it's like what people have said, the data's expired after that. So one of our core tenets is that youth are experts. We see them as experts. We cannot know what's happening with them and to them unless we engage them. Engage them in our research, but also engage them in our team. That means what we do is we have very accessible research methods, and the technology we use is accessible. I mean, we have high school students who are team members, and they're not token team members. They actually do the same work that I do. And it just shows that what we do is not that complicated. It's not that hard, because it can't be. If it's that hard and complicated, then they can't really be true partners in what we do. I mean, even just last year, one of our first year undergrads published a first author paper in JAMA Pediatrics about Jewel, something that she came up with. And she said, this is a problem on campus. This is a problem across the country. You know, she talked to people across campus, you know, Paul Lance and all the people in school of public health and public policy. And she came up with these questions. We fielded them, answering this, kind of filling this gap in why youth Jewel. And it was incredibly impactful in the tobacco research area. And it was from her. It totally came from her. And those are the examples that we see over and over again in our research over the years. And so they're the most valuable team members that we have. A lot of people say, like, why the heck do we are members of the American Association of Public Opinion Research. And a lot of people are like, how do you do this? We give them $20 and they won't text us back. And so we ask periodically these process level questions about, like, why do you answer our questions? And you know, the main reasons are money, but a lot of them are because they feel like they're able to help people. And this likely is part of the reason why feeding back what we've done with their responses is so important, and keeping our website up to date is so important. Making sure our questions are easy to answer. You know, when collaborators come in, they're always coming in with their validated research questions and scales and things. And we're like, you know what, we've done those and they don't work real well here. And that's one of the things that we can say we've gotten much better at, is saying, you know, tell us what you're trying to get at. Consider using this question instead of that. And so you can see these youth they think it's fun. They feel like they're staying in a loop. They feel like the world doesn't listen to them, and it gives them a platform. It helps them to reflect. They derive benefit, which also brings up the other point of, like, well, is My Voice an intervention? Honestly, we think about that all the time. Maybe it is an intervention. you know, one of the things we talk about in our class is by virtue of doing a thing or seeing a thing or reflecting on a thing, you change that thing. You change that thing. And even if that thing is you, right? If you are reflecting on a thing and that thing is you, you're reflecting on yourself, it changes you. So perhaps we don't typically measure that or use it as an intervention to change people's opinions. We are really trying to elicit their opinions. So again, this is another question we've asked. What do you gain from doing this? I mean, people literally ask us, what do your participants gain from even participating in My Voice? And these are very representative of what people say. So I feel like I'm going to stop there. I want to just show that this is just a very small representation. Our team usually fluctuates between 30 and 50 people from across campus and across the country. And I could never be here talking about what we do without all these amazing, amazing people. They range in age from 14 to, I don't want to say how old, but it takes a lot of people to make this work. And so I would love to hear any questions you might have. We are very open. We have full transparency. Actually, APOR has this transparency initiative, and we feel very strongly about, especially in our polling research, to be completely transparent. So please, I would love to hear your thoughts and questions, suggestions, comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Tammy. That is, I just think that it is the coolest thing that you guys do this. I think it's important and essential. I have a question about, you know, something that makes me nervous personally about conducting any research with adolescents is, what do you do when they say scary things, you know, and whether it be, you know, disclose something, you know, about their mental health that requires action, or just like, you know, what is the line, you know, between dangerous and not dangerous? And there's just a lot of different ways that could go. And how do you all handle that?
Yeah, that's actually one of the trickiest part of getting this to the IRB. I think the IRB has been one of our strongest and closest partners. And in that partnership started with an understanding that we're a poll where we're not reading their responses in real time. I mean, I sometimes do that just because it's so fascinating. I'll just sit there as they pop in and on the platform, but the youth in their consent, and then many times after that, understand this is not a place to ask for help. There's often not humans reading your responses. If you need help or you have an issue, they are given our actual study line. Our website has a comment form. There's lots of other ways to reach out to us. Don't do it in the responses, because there's no way that we can help in a timely way. That being said, like any other study, if they say they're going to hurt themselves or hurt other people, we just have a protocol for that. We want people to feel comfortable saying how they really feel. And honestly, mental health issues has come up in every data set. I mean, we could be talking about what's your favorite movie, and mental health will come up. And so unless they say they're going to hurt themselves or hurt other people, that is just their response to a question. They can say, I feel awful, or I feel like I don't want to keep on living, or whatever. And that's just the way they feel. Doesn't mean that it needs to be acted upon. Actually, that's one of the main reasons that youth will say, I don't tell people, is because I feel like, you know, this is going to be taken into this other area. If they want help, we remind them many, many times the way to actually get help. It's not through responding to this. And I think the other really important thing is, there's so much going on with youth that is scary. Like, you could say, well, what if they disclose like somebody's hurting them, and it's really this area where we work really closely with the IRB, and is this a study where we're trying to identify and intervene on any type of anything, and it's not. And you know, we've had to demonstrate a lot of precedent where even if you ask about a thing, it doesn't actually make them do that thing more. And we have to rely a lot on things like the other national surveys across the country that talk about risk-taking behaviors among youth. We have very clear in IRB that we don't ask them things like, how many times have you had sex, or who are you having sex with, or, you know, do you feel like killing yourself now? Like that would really put us in a position where intervention would be completely necessary. We ask about their opinions on things and their perceptions of things, and, you know, their experiences of things. And so, you know, we feel really grateful to have this relationship with RB, where we've submitted probably hundreds of questions that are the types that we would ask, but we don't submit the exact wording of all the questions, just because over the years they really understood, you know, and we publish our questions online so that anybody can see. It's really about their opinion on things. We let other people ask about the scary things and then, you know, intervene on those. We don't intervene. There's no intervention part of this study as it is now.
Thanks, that's really helpful. And I think that makes a really good point. You know, we have a lot of fellows on this call too. You know, you all with My Voice have carved out this area that doesn't overlap. Like there are the questions that the CDC and other groups ask are very important. They're part of the puzzle, and you guys have figured out what piece of the puzzle you can contribute without overlap or duplication. Yeah, and I think that that's really important to think about when, you know, we're developing our research agendas. Where's that missing puzzle piece, and how can we contribute?
Yeah, we depend on those studies, right? Sometimes there's the things that help us identify what we should be asking about.
Hi, Tammy. This is Courtney. Thank you so much for your talk. My question is, with your questionnaires, how do you develop them, and how do you deal with pushback about not using validated questionnaires?
Yeah, we have a very set process that in each step is very flexible, but it starts with the collaborator writes a short proposal that grew out of what my mentor, Matt Davis, had given us as a one-pager template. And basically they fill out, you know, a proposed title, a short background, a description of the research question, a short description of the methods, a set of, we say, don't write more than 5 to 8 questions that you might want to field to our sample, and then their dissemination and their implications, the potential implications. And so it's important for our team to kind of review that first, because our team, I see them as like, they are so ready to nitpick your questions, because that's what we do every Thursday at 2 p.m. We look at what people want to get, which is the research question. Then we look at what they're asking, and we help them to, we literally, every word by word, based on our experiences, we edit questions, and we talk to the researchers saying, well, is this, but what are you actually wanting to get? Because a lot of times they'll rely on validated questions because of the academic reasons, right? And we said, well, that's great for, you know, for academic reasons, but is it the academic goal you're going for? Are you actually trying to understand this phenomenon? Because your questions will never have been validated the way we're about to ask them. And many times they're not validated on the population we're going to ask. So then therefore they are no longer validated. So we try to move people away. And at the end of the day, we love experimenting. We're like, well, let's ask your scale, right? They'll be like 5, strongly agree, 1, disagree, or strongly disagree. And then we'll have people saying 1, strongly agree. So how would you then reconcile that in your data, right? And so they have to start thinking about this before we field it. Now so moving on the process. So after we have this meeting, and we kind of like nitpick their questions and help them get them to a place that everybody feels like you're going to get good responses for your research question, we have a whole other sample that's not our research sample, that's our pilot sample, that includes youth, it includes research experts, it includes a lot of other investigators with expertise and experience with My Voice, and it goes to their phones. So every Thursday we have a pilot sample of about 50 people who will then respond to your first draft of questions. And half, you know, maybe a third will actually try to answer the question, which is helpful, because then you'll realize like, wow, that question really missed the mark. And then the other 2/3 will actually comment on the question saying, hey, this word, or this this combination of words, or why don't you da 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 da. Then the next week after that, so a week later, we will present the pilot feedback, and then we will then again nitpick your questions and edit and edit and edit. And so basically, after that second meeting, the first one is to get your questions ready to pilot. The second question, the second meeting is to get you ready to field. And so that is the usual pace. We can go much faster than that. We could do things in like days if we need to, but we like to do it in this format because on Thursdays we have about this many people, sometimes a little bit less, sometimes a little bit more, talking about your questions. And so the investigators are hearing like, you know, these high schoolers and college students who are in this age group, they're saying like, hey, this doesn't make sense to me. This makes me want to say this. Is this what you're trying to get at? And then we field the questions. Once we field the questions, we say we have 1 week. They have 1 week to answer, because after 1 week passes, the next set goes out. So there's no way to answer the one from the previous weeks. They get a bonus if they do 12 weeks in a row. That is probably one of the things that those young people are concerned most about. So what we learned is, you know, how do we get an 80% response rate is that we have all these different tools to make sure they know what questions week they're on. We're like, you're on week 8 of 12, keep on going. You know, before we didn't do that. And they'd be like, I don't know, how far are we from this bonus? And did I answer every question? And now they know, and they can kind of like keep track, and they can hit their goal of trying to answer all the questions. Does that help, Courtney?
Awesome. Yes, it is very helpful. And another follow-up question I have, is there anything that you've learned about like questions that do and don't work well, like the Likert scales, or, you know, whatever? Are there certain ways that you ask your questions?
Yes. I myself keep wanting to ask these because we are coding these questions all the time. Just imagine 5,000 text messages. We're like, just give us a number. Can't we just, you know, put that into Stata and crank it out? But every time we do that, we found that it just creates so much uncertainty, because people don't think in numbers, especially young people don't think in numbers like that. Like, how worried are you, or how strongly do you feel, you know, and so we typically will keep things as open-ended as possible. And some investigators will really want to put a scale or a number, and then we encourage them to put an open-ended response for them to almost validate the number that was said. And I feel like there's a part of your question I was going to say something else and I forgot. So Courtney, remind me again.
I was just anything that you've learned about things that work and don't work in the surveys. Yeah.
Things that
go ahead. Sorry, don't want you to forget.
Things that do not work. Asking you to solve policy problems. We're like, well, what policy would help then, right? They're like, what do you mean? Like, what is a policy? What kind of policy? Like, they're like, that's bad. And we always remind ourselves, like, if we can't even, as people who study policies, think of an answer, like, how can we? It's better. What we found, what works, is to ask them to describe what's happening to them, right? Like what they're seeing and feeling now. They are very good at that. And they are very verbose. Like, one of the things that we were so shocked about in COVID, we've asked probably 7 to 10 sets on COVID, is that they feel so, they're like, I know a lot. I remember it was March 13th or something. Like, we're like, what do you know about COVID? I know a lot about COVID. We're like, whoa. And so the next question was like, what do you know about COVID? And they were just like, telling us all these things that they've seen in the news and heard from their family. And it was like, wow, they're able to tell us what they perceive that they know. Like, we're like, tell us what you know. This is what they think that they know about these things. Those are the questions where you're going to get a lot of insight, because some of the things that they know were very, very wrong, right? But they were very, very sure that that's what they knew and that's what was right. And so that kind of information is so useful. Now, is it right and is it good that they know these things? Probably not. And that's one of the things we work a lot with our collaborators with, is like, just because they say that they don't want homework doesn't mean the next thing we do is to stop giving them homework. No, the valuable part is that they said that. And our job is to say, well, why? What about the homework? Like, what, you know, and for us to be able to use that information to improve their well-being.
Awesome. Sorry, I'm monopolizing. Did someone else want to ask a question? So do most of your survey questions have room for their like open-ended responses?
Do you mean enough text message characters for them to respond?
Yeah.
Yeah, so
okay.
Very rarely. So when the text messages it's like when they're typing, sometimes you can tell they're just like on their computer. There's like there's like long answers. You can tell it's been concatenated. So in text messaging, when it goes beyond the character limit, there's like a thing in the cloud that basically will take the two messages and put them together. Depending on your carrier, sometimes it gets messed up. And so when it comes to us, it's sometimes the other way. And very rarely they'll write so much that it'll actually go into the next question or be cut off. But you have to write like a mini essay for that to happen, because the platform is able to collect so much. I mean, there is this one time where we asked them, what is your best life? Describe to me your best life, something like that. And this one participant started to talk about, like, I would live in this size house with this many square feet, this color roof, and this kind of tile, and this many bathroom. I mean, it would just started like this color carpet and this plush and this type of furniture. I mean, it was started to get like, and then that just like, it just ran out. So sometimes that happens.
Yeah.
But most of the time, I would say like 99.8% of the time, their responses are the same as what a regular text message to you and I look like. It's to the point, it's short, and we've even done studies and published on this where we ask them on text message and we ask them in person. And we found is that when you do traditional qualitative analysis, you get the same findings. It's just that in a text message, they've kind of put their thoughts in a short form and just told you straight to your face, versus when you're doing this, we do these qualitative in-depth one-on-one personal interviews, they feel like they have the chit chat with you. They kind of like go around the issue and around the issue. And then like, you kind of have to like get them to like, you know, say what they really mean, but it's like, they don't want, it's like a conversation, right? Like, so people don't just like blurt things in conversations, but in a text message, it's short, it's to the point. It's supposed to be blurted, right? It's just supposed to just say the thing. So that's the majority of the responses.
Awesome. Thanks.
Do you feel like they think this isn't worded correctly? You know, sometimes when I'm filling out a survey, I like overthink my answer to something for like a really long time. Does that happen, or is it all over the board, or is it kind of like, yes, no? Like, can you see how long it takes them to respond to different questions?
You can see how long it takes them to respond. They're usually done in a few minutes, like max. And the responses will range from yes, no, or YN, or, you know, I don't know, to IDK, like to long paragraph, like long, like mini paragraphs. They look long on the text message, but like where they're really explaining. And I mean, COVID is a really great example where we will ask them about their experiences with COVID. They'll be like, nothing, it's a hoax. I don't know anything. It's not real. I don't have any experiences with it, to like people who are like, my mom, my grandmother, my aunt all got it. My great grandmother died in a nursing home. I didn't get to see her and she was alone. I mean, the whole thing, like you'll get the whole same thing when we asked about opioids. We had people saying like, well, what do you think of when you hear the word opioids? People are like, puppies, China, you know, and drugs. And then you have other people saying like, I think about opioids all the time. My dad has been in rehab 3 times, you know, it's torn our family apart. And it's one of the things that I worry about, that I might, blah, blah, blah. I mean, you do see what I'm saying? Like, it's this whole spectrum. And just the length of their answers, you can kind of get a sense of how interested they are in the question, but also how much they have to say about the topic.
This brings another question that I was curious about. How do you think about generalizability?
There's no generalizability here. Like, think of this as like 1,000-person focus group, right? Like, there's no generalizability. And I think that that's one of the things that's really hard for people. You know, we always talk to our collaborators about like, what is my voice good at and what is it not good at, right? We're not a nationally representative poll. That's not what we do. We're trying to get at the how and the why and the stories behind those nationally representative surveys, right? Like, tell us the stories about what's going on with you. And yes, we're going to get almost 1,000 different stories. And so the challenge a lot of times is getting those stories down to something that's digestible. That's the other area of expertise that our team has really worked on over the years, is to say, well, crap, we've got like all these stories across the board. You know, how do we talk about this in a way that's digestible quickly for the people who need it? So I would say generalizability is not our goal. Generalizability is not our job. There's other surveys and studies that do that. The stories are our job. The narratives are our job. The things that a lot of times people don't get to hear. That's our job.
I may have missed this, but just out of curiosity, is the platform following a fixed sample over time, or are you taking cross sections at each push of a survey?
So what we do is every 12 weeks, we have a set sample. So right now our sample's 1,150 youth representing every state
About 50% are under 18, about 50% are over 18. We do quota-based sampling where we look at the American Community Survey, which is a nationally representative survey, and we try to benchmark on 5 different variables: age, race, ethnicity, gender, SES, and region of the country. And so when we're doing our recruitment, targeted recruitment on Instagram and different social media platforms, we're trying to meet on the cross of these 5 different variables. And that has given us such a great, I hate saying the word diverse, but like a great broad range of people. The places that we have really oversampled, we have about 8% non-binary gender. People who work in this area are blown away at how many people we have in our sample that are non-binary, because it's apparently very difficult to get those populations. We also have about 12, 13, 14% Hispanic. We have a huge oversampling of Asians. For some reason, it's like 8 or 9 or 10%, which is way more than the population that is nationally representative. And we also have a huge sample of youth who have qualified for free or reduced lunch when they were in school, which is our measure for lower SES compared to medium or high SES. And so 1/3, that's higher than what would be in the general population. And so that's what our sample looks like. We work really, really hard to keep our racial ethnicity, racial and ethnic minority participants, because over the years we've learned that they're the ones who churn the most, especially males, and also getting more males. In our study, we have more females. It's probably like 60-40, but in this particular phase, we're in phase 7 now, we're closer to 50-50, but a middle chunk of that is non-binary. So does that help answer your question, Kara? So oh no, it doesn't. I didn't even answer the question, sorry. So basically every 12 weeks, we have a set sample. Then when that 12-week ends, we look at our active sample, and then recruitment is open all the time. We add in the new people who've signed up throughout the year or throughout the 12 weeks and the time that they weren't, in the previous sample. We look at the demographics for those 5 variables, and then we target our recruitment across the country to make sure that we're as close as we can be at those 5 demographics. And so every 12 weeks, there's this kind of like churn of in and out of people, with our goal of meeting those benchmarks, those nationally representative benchmarks.
Thanks, Tammy.
We have time for more questions, but I wanted to bring up that in the chat box, I put a link to our Qualtrics survey. This is really helpful as we think about the curriculum that we're going to continue to build for the method seminars, as we think about, what is helpful, what do people want to know. And Tammy, I'm happy to share the results of the survey with you afterwards. Also, I know that can be helpful for many things, but you guys can just click on that. It used to be the QR codes that we used to hand out at the end, but then we realized now that's all virtual, we could just put it in the chat. It's a little easier. So if you guys can fill that out at any time. We have more time for questions, but if anyone needs to leave early, there's the link.
I'm wondering if I can ask you guys some questions.
That's great.
Yeah, like I wonder, hearing what it is that we do, what pops into your mind about ways to reach youth better? What do you think that we can do to have more impact? I think that that's something we try to ask everybody.
The first thing that I was thinking, and you guys may have already explored some of this, is that, when I think about people that have a lot of access to adolescents, I think of middle school teachers in general. And, I wonder how much partnering with, there's middle school teachers that would be very interested in not only what you guys are doing, but teaching their classes, whether it be in, government or something like that. And I wondered if leveraging middle school teachers in areas that you might like to recruit could be a good option.
We actually wrote, and I don't know the numbers, the NIH had, we resubmitted a grant where we're engaging freshmen and sophomore and high school students to be in a large scale involved in My Voice, and then also in a local scale, for this exact reason, where they're learning about civics, they're learning about social studies, they're learning about government, and in this NIH grant was designed to involve and engage and inspire underrepresented minorities to do research. And so, you know, we just thought like, wow, not only do we have so much experience, you know, a lot of our team members who are youth, we purposely invite and include underrepresented minorities for the same reason. And how exciting would it be to get this grant to be able to really expand our efforts and all the lessons we've learned to more schools and more communities. So Sarah, we are thinking the same exact way. Let's hope they fund that so we can do it. They were very encouraging.
My husband's a middle school teacher, which is why I said middle school. I actually forget that there are high school teachers. So that actually makes a lot more sense.
No, but they were, I mean, the first round reviews were so encouraging. So we're really
good. Fingers crossed. That's awesome.
All right, I'm going to give you guys a more specific question. So one of we just submitted an R21 using my voice because we have this dream. Our dream is to create an online open access platform that's like Jane Semantic. Raise your hand if you've heard of Jane Semantic. It's that, you've never heard of Jane Semantic, Google it now. It's like, I have all of my fellows and students use it because Jane Semantic is a place where they can pop their abstract in text box, and it uses natural language processing to tell you what are the top journals that this might be published in, who are collaborators across the country, you know, what other articles, and it's like so awesome. It's this wonderful tool that people can use to just learn about other research when there's now this explosion of information. And so our dream is to create a very similar platform. It's like Jane Semantic, where there's this text box, but what you could do is paste all your qualitative information in there. You can select what kind of natural language processing. Do you want sentiment analysis? Do you want like a WordNet semantic analysis? Do you want, what do you want? All these different types of NLP. And it'll just like pop out an outcome, like pop out this output so that you can quickly get a sense. And so papers that we publish in this area have shown that when you apply NLP as to augment traditional human, you know, qualitative analysis, it enhances so much. Oh, it's Jane Semantic. I just saw that from Kara. Oh, thank you, Jane. Perfect, perfect. Oh, James Semantic. I'm sorry. This is what happens on Zoom. If you put something in the chat, I'm gonna try to. So thank you, Kara. Anyways, and so I don't know what I was saying before, but we're hoping that we can put this NLP tool to work for all people doing qualitative research, instead of just people who have, you know, access to computer scientists. Because one of the biggest limitations in doing qualitative research with huge populations, kind of like we do, is that it takes forever for teams to, you know, go through 5,000 text messages. Even though they're text messages, I mean, it's a lot of work. That's one of the reasons why we have so many people on our team, is that we had to break it down into little packets of work. But if we could just like pop it in, and in our studies we've shown that it's so helpful. You know, one of the things that we did was look at police interactions among youth. We asked them about that, and because of the biases that exist even in the 2 or 3 researchers, you know, the NLP algorithms that we applied demonstrated that we have missed whole themes, complete themes, and that we have to be way more open to using something that's much more objective. Now, algorithms are not objective. They're subjective to the people who have designed the algorithms, but they're still, we found, better than just having 2, 3, even 4 people. These people are people. So we are really excited. We try to apply that to all of our research, but we want that to be available to the masses. And we're kind of in alpha testing right now. We have this platform called GOATS. It's called goats because we think of goats like kind of like eating everything and like processing it, but I can't even remember what it stands for, but it's like, you know, quickly going through survey responses, and we found it to be so helpful. So, you know, those are the kinds of things that we're trying to spin off from my voice. One other area that I always like to talk to in terms of the way that my voice functions financially is that we don't like to write grants for my voice, because we in strategic science have this belief that if this study has utility and value, then it should go on based on that value. It should not be because we got an R01 and after 5 years, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? So the way that the money works for My Voice is people who want to ask questions, like from outside the country or within our university, contribute to the overhead and the cost of the incentives, which is very inexpensive. So if you're within the University of Michigan, we ask you to contribute $5,000, which covers the incentive and part of the overhead and part of the demographic, because we give them more money to do a demographic survey in the beginning. And if people don't want to pay that, then My Voice will go away. But every phase, we bring in about $10,000 to $50,000. And that's like twice a year. That is way more than enough to continue My Voice. We're going into our 5th year. That's the way that our model has been. And so we're always pushed to innovation, because if we don't continue to evolve and get better and provide value, then we disappear. Then nobody will want to pay and be part of this. And we love that pressure. You know, we're not useful, then we shouldn't be doing this. We should be doing something useful.
Tammy, this is really awesome. I think that there's a lot that we can learn from, you know, the way that you guys have constructed this and pushing for your innovation and understanding where your, you know, where you fit in the voice of adolescence. And, you know, I think a lot of us, we always try to make our research, like if someone says, well, you know, can't you tell us this? I know that I like try to figure out a way to do it. And I really think that, you know, I'm going to start thinking about things the way that you guys do of, that's not what we were made to do, right? Like administrative claims aren't made to do social determinants of health, and that just is what it is. That's it, not as an excuse, but just, you know, knowing what the limitations are and what you can and can't do.
One part of the picture, right? It's one part of the picture. And it's okay. Like we need all facets to understand it.
And we all do everything.
Yeah. We just can't forget what we could consider one of the critical things, which is like the actual people. Like, don't forget to actually ask the actual people, because if you do, what we found is that you usually will miss the mark in whatever policy or whatever finding that you have. I'm just going to end by saying you guys hopefully will have this chance to just, you know, let all of what we talked about today marinate. And if you ever have questions, you know, concerns, issues, ideas, we would love to hear them. Email to us or to me personally. We take them all very seriously. We love to experiment and try new things and improve and get better. So thank you guys so much for this opportunity to talk with you. It's been so much fun. I hope we get a chance to stay in touch.